We see cargo trains all the time in our area. Not everybody knows that at one point we actually had passenger trains and traction lines that traveled through Milford and beyond. Part 3. Trains and traction lines. If you missed Part 2, here's a quick recap. As settlers arrived in Clermont County, state and local governments authorized construction of roads, turnpikes, and bridges to make travel safer and more efficient. These roads and bridges were the beginnings of the system that we travel on today. Between the 1820s and 1860s, America integrated the railroads into the national economy, and Ohio was no exception. In March of 1836, the Little Miami Railroad Company was chartered by an act passed by the General Assembly. The company was to build a railroad from Cincinnati up through the Little Miami Valley toward Xenia. The company was granted the right to raise $750,000 of capital stock, selling shares for $50 each. Matthias Kugler of New Germany, which is now Camp Dennison, subscribed to $10,000 worth of stock and became one of the first 12 men to be elected a director of the company. John Kugler, the son of Matthias, was awarded a contract to provide the wooden rails and ties for the first 28 miles of the railroad. A steam-powered sawmill was built on Batavia Goshen Road in Stone Lake Township to cut the timber. Due to a national depression, the track heading towards Milford was delayed until 1841. The first locomotive, the General Morrow, and 2 passenger cars rolled into Milford on December 14, 1841. It took 1.5 hours to get to Milford from Cincinnati. The depot building still stands today, right across the river from downtown Milford. The impact of the railroad was big. Stockholders saw returns on their investments. Workers building the line had years of work. Most towns and villages enjoyed commercial and social growth. It became a commuter line for many heading to work or school in downtown Cincinnati. Producers had a quicker way to move their goods. Lumber and whiskey shipped from the mills and the distillery in Milford to the public landing. Farmers also used the trains to get animals and produce downtown quickly. Abraham Lincoln actually rode the train and made a brief stop in Milford on February 13, 1861, during his 12-day inaugural journey to Washington, D.C. The railroad was also a vital transportation link for troops stationed at Camp Dennison. Hundreds of Cincinnatians also used the line as passengers to visit soldiers at the camp, paying 25 cents for a round trip. On July 14, 1863, John Hunt Morgan's raiders rampaged through Clermont County, and they hit the Little Miami Railroad Company. One brigade attempted to destroy the bridge in Miamiville. Union soldiers were able to stop that attack. A second group of raiders barricaded the track near the dangerous curve area. This caused a southbound train called the Kilgore to derail, killing the firemen. On December 1st, 1869, the Little Miami Railroad leased all of its property to the Pennsylvania Railroad Company. The lease was good for 99 years and renewable forever. By the early 1900s, the Little Miami Railroad had evolved from an independent pioneer line into a critical high-traffic corridor within the massive Pennsylvania Railroad empire. Following World War II, the railroad faced severe decline due to competition from the subsidized trucking industry and the new interstate highway system. The last passenger trains to stop at Milford did so on December 12, 1948. The railroad station closed in April of 1967, and the last passenger train to pass Milford was in May of 1969. Freight trains continued to use the tracks until the 1970s. By 1980, the railroad was considered abandoned. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources, along with local governments, began purchasing land along the abandoned railroad. In 1984, the Little Miami Scenic Trail officially opened. The Cincinnati, Batavia, and Williamsburg Railroad was chartered in 1876 to construct a narrow-gauge railway connecting Cincinnati to Williamsburg. The company was renamed the Cincinnati and Eastern Railroad 5 months later. The initial 16-mile segment opened in 1877 and was often called the Short Line. The line was completed in 1884 and ran from Cincinnati towards Portsmouth. The company changed hands several times from 1887 until it was acquired by the Norfolk and Western Railway Company in 1901. The Cincinnati Eastern Railroad began leasing and operating the line in 2014. The line saw increased use with the construction of the Purina plant in Batavia. Thanks to developing technology in lighting, generators, and motors, electric streetcars became a preferred means of travel. By the turn of the century, rural interturbine electric cars, or traction lines, began to move from the cities to the countryside. The lines were relatively inexpensive to build and generally ran along highway or country roads. 5 franchises were granted for our area, but only 2 were built. The Cincinnati and Columbus Traction Company was chartered by the state on March 20th, 1901. Many people referred to it as the Swing Line. The line was unable to get rights to use the bridge in Milford, so it decided to construct its own bridge. The bridge would cost $50,000, with $25,000 for approaches, one from Wooster Pike and the other one from High Street. On April 22nd, 1906, the first car ran to Hillsborough. The bridge was damaged by a flood in 1907. A second-hand truss was used for bridge repairs. The bridge was washed away in the flood of 1913. Due to the cost of that and other damage to the track, the C&C was sent into receivership. Operations were continued by the Union Savings Bank and Trust, who petitioned to abandon the line, and the line ceased operation on December 31st, 1919. If you're interested, you can still see remnants of the C&C bridge when you visit the Little Miami River. The Cincinnati, Milford, and Loveland Traction Line was incorporated in September of 1902. The founder and principal investor was B.H. Kroger, and the line was often referred to as the Kroger Line. In January of 1904, the Village of Milford took legal action when the company requested permission to lay tracks on Main Street. The argument was over who would maintain the street. It was settled by the Ohio Supreme Court in favor of Milford. In 1904, service began into Milford. The line crossed over the Iron Bridge, traveled through Milford, and continued out towards Mulberry. The board of directors made a change that resulted in the road going to Blanchester instead of Loveland. In 1918, the name of the company was changed to the Cincinnati, Milford, and Blanchester Company to reflect the change. Residents often called it the Cincinnati, Milford, and Back. The CMB would run freight cars in the evenings after passenger runs were finished for the day. The CM&B was sold in 1925 to Lawrence Van Ness, who was only interested in the power business. The line was abandoned and sold in 1926 to the Cincinnati Street Railway, who made the end of the line the intersection of Route 28 and Route 50 near the school. Everything east of that area was pulled up for scrap. By 1936, Milford was no longer a stop on the line. One important thing to note about the CM&L line was that it was responsible for the introduction of electric power and lighting into Milford, thanks to the electric generating plant in Montauk. They were the low bidder on the village contract to erect street lights in the lower part of town. The first 20 lights were turned on in October of 1907. And that is the story of the rise and fall of passenger rail in Milford. Watch for the 4th and final part of our History of Transportation in Milford series when we talk about the arrival of the automobile to Milford.